Hi, I'm Kim, and this is An Oasis of Books. Today I'm doing a joint wrap-up of Tudortember and OCTember. These are two reading events I took part in September, and boy am I glad I did. I read some amazing books, I was introduced to some wonderful new authors, and I can't wait to share these books with you right now. I'll put a timestamp in my pinned comment and in the description below letting you know when the two different parts of this wrap-up start, so that if you just want to watch one, you can. But I encourage you to watch both because there's some great books and authors in both of these wrap-up sections. Now, the books I'd like to share with you first are ones I read for Tudortember. Now, this event was run by Julie at Bookish Travels, and I did another video with my pile of possibilities at the beginning of September. So you can look back there if you want to hear what I was thinking I would be reading. There were 4 books, and in reality, I ended up reading 3, but not 3 of those 4. I read 2 of those 4, and then I found another one that I actually had on my shelf and had forgotten about, and I really wanted to read, so I did. Yeah, as far as the other 2 that were in my pile of possibilities, one I started, didn't really get along with it that well, so I DNF'd it, and the other one I didn't get to, but I will next year, I think. So for Tudortember, I had thought I might read The House of Dudley by Joanne Paul, Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel, Dissolution, which is the first in the Matthew Shardlake mystery series by C.J. Sansom, and The Pretender by Jo Harkin. Now, I'll tell you up front, I didn't get to The Pretender. That historical fiction book was inspired by a true piece of trivia from history about a boy named, well, John, but he becomes named Lambert Simnel. And he, well, is a supposed claimant to the throne of England, not of his own making. He was retrieved from a life of peasantry in the countryside at the age of 10 and told, yes, you're the last of the Plantagenet line and we're going to train you to take your rightful place on the throne. So what happened in real life, you can easily research. What happens in the book, a little bit of alternative history, is quite interesting according to everything I've read about the book and heard about the book, and I do want to read it. So it's definitely on my must-read list for next year's Tudortember. Now, the book in my original pile of possibilities that I ended up DNFing after about a third of the way through the book was a surprise to me because I thought I would really like it because I do love historical mysteries. Yes, it was Dissolution, the first in the Matthew Shardlake mystery series by C.J. Sansom. I don't really know why I didn't care for this series. I truly thought I would, but it just didn't entertain me. I didn't really like the characters much, and maybe if I'd stuck with it, I would have gotten to like it. So I might try to get in the future. But I had so many great books I wanted to get to in September that I just didn't want to spend any more time on that one. So I set it aside. But there were 2 books I did read from my original POP. One of them was Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. Now, I did read this book from beginning to end, and I liked it. I didn't love it, which I guess that was another surprise to me for Tudortember because my expectations for this book and this series were super high based on, so many reviews and hearty recommendations for me to read it. I thought I was just going to absolutely love it, and I didn't really. I did like it, and obviously the writing is very well done, and there are elements of it which were quite compelling. I think the reason I didn't really gel with it so much and really love it is because I don't really prefer, I'm finding, to be that close in a male protagonist's head and life, and especially when it's someone I don't necessarily find myself liking enormously. Yeah, there were elements of this book, don't get me wrong, that I really did like, but there were other things I was like, yeah, I'm not sure I really liked the way that was portrayed, or okay, I don't need to see all of that, stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm not sure if I will pick the series up again later. I might if I'm in the mood for it, but it was, a very solid 3.5 for me. But what rated much higher was The House of Dudley by Joanne Paul. I was really all about reading this because it sounded so great. I mean, these generations of Dudleys who are always either at the very, very high in relation to the court, or at the very, very low. You know, they rose and fell with such regularity based on whatever person happened to be on the throne at the time and who they were backing, that it sounded just so intriguing. Now, it is clear in all the written descriptions of this book and in several reviews that I heard on BookTube or read about that the Dudleys were a very deceptive and ambitious family down through the generations. They did what they felt they needed to do to get where they wanted to go. And, you know, that can be really entertaining to read about. And I think the reason this ended up for me like about a 4.25 rather than higher was simply because I really wasn't a huge fan of these people. It was interesting to see how they handled the situations they found themselves in, how they took advantage of people around them and circumstances that they were in at any given point in time to drag themselves up, hold themselves up, to profit as much as possible. That was very interesting, but I didn't find myself necessarily rooting for them. So it was a good read, very excellent writing, and I found its focus on a very specific family really helpful in supplementing my knowledge of the different periods throughout the Tudor era. So yeah, great read. And then lastly, the book I pulled off my shelf, couldn't believe I'd forgotten about it, was The Wives of Henry VIII by Antonia Fraser. Now, this was definitely my most enjoyed book for Tudortember, and I gave it, I think, a 4.5. Maybe it should have been higher than that. I'm pretty stingy sometimes when it comes to those stars. I'm kind of new to star ratings. I never did them before I started Storygraph, but in any case, I did love this book. Antonia Fraser, a highly respected historian, does a fabulous job breaking down the different wives of Henry VIII. But you know, the beginning, the very first wife, Catherine of Aragon, we first see the backdrop, you know, Henry VII and his first son, Arthur, and then the younger son, who becomes Henry VIII. We see how things developed and why Henry was the way he was in the beginning, and wonder at the beginning, how is he going to change, and why is he going to change the way he did? But it all becomes clear as you continue reading. Now, the first two wives, as should be, take up a lot more space than the last four wives. I believe Catherine and Anne Boleyn each had about 100 pages here, and then the next four wives each had about 50 to 60 pages. I felt like it was very representative of them, and really Antonia Fraser does wonderfully well with getting into their upbringing, their mindset when they came to the court of Henry. It does a great job using some primary sources throughout to depict how the people around, other people, important people in the court, how they viewed these women. I found I was really expanding my, academic knowledge of these women and Henry and the time period, but also I was getting much more of a realistic feel for who these people were as well, people. And that is exactly the kind of book I love. I did do some research ahead of time to make sure that Antonia Fraser was a historian whom I could trust, whom I could depend on for the correct facts, but also who I could trust to give me good interpretations, good impressions, good critical thinking and drawing conclusions that are not necessarily set in stone, but from which we can probably derive the most likely end results. Well, not me, but people like Antonia Fraser, who have done the studies and have been in the field for so long. So yes, this definitely was my best read for Tudortember. I'm so glad I read it. And if you haven't read it yet, well, I highly recommend you get your hands on it as soon as possible. Tudortember was very educational for me and a lot of fun. I really appreciated Julie's videos, and if you haven't seen them yet, you should go check them out even now, where she took us around to castles and other places that, you know, the people of this time period lived, walked, breathed, experienced life. It was a surprisingly connected, authentic experience for me, even though I'm watching it across the ocean on a video. So thank you again, Julie, for all your work for Tudortember. I am definitely looking forward to participating again next year. And now for my wrap up of the second reading event that I took part in September, and that was Octotember, reading about cephalopods, including, of course, octopuses, in September. And I heard about this reading event from my friend Jenny Jabel's channel, which I will link below. And I had a lot of fun and discovered some great new authors in taking part in this event. So I had 4 books on my original pile of possibilities for Octotember, and I read 3 of them. I didn't even start the 4th one. I just didn't get to it. But I did add another book that I happened upon at the bookstore. So I read 2 fiction and 2 nonfiction books for Octotember. The first nonfiction book I read was Secrets of the Octopus by Cy Montgomery. Borrowed this book from the library, and it was so good, full of fascinating, gorgeous photography. I just love seeing all of these creatures up close and in such great detail. And Cy Montgomery's writing was super easy to follow, very interesting, all kinds of amazing facts I didn't know about. And yeah, I definitely will read more from Cy Montgomery because of how good this book was. Now, the second nonfiction book I read was a 5-star read for me, and I did a whole video devoted just to it, which I will link here and at the end of the video and in the description below. I really hope you go check it out because this book is so good. It's a biography called The Lady and the Octopus, How Jean Villepreux Invented Aquariums and Revolutionized Marine Biology. Now, I'm not going to go into this book here because, like I said, I did a whole video on it, but it is so, so, so good. I can't really recommend it highly enough. It's a fantastic biography, absolutely amazing historical information, but it is full of paintings and photographs and diagrams and written letters and other primary source documents, and it's just wonderful. And all about this woman scientist at a time when they really weren't accepted, and she studied the Argonauts and realized that they would be much easier to study alive than dead. And how could she do that with how big they were? Well, she came up with the idea for the aquarium. So I'm not going to say anything more, but trust me, you want to check this out. It's not a long book, but it's a great one. Now, the first fiction book I'll talk about is the one I picked up on the spur of the moment while I was browsing at a bookstore, and I saw the cover with an octopus on it. This was a woman's contemporary fiction called Sea Change by Gina Chung. And I'll tell you, I almost didn't finish this book. When I first started it, which I did while at the bookstore, I thought, you know, this sounds really familiar. It sounds a lot like Remarkably Bright Creatures. And if you know that book, you know it's about a woman who has a personal relationship, shall we say, with an octopus at an aquarium where she works. Well, this book is about a woman who has a personal relationship with an octopus at an aquarium where she works. So I was like, really? Okay, should I bother? But I did, and I'm glad I did. I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. It was a bit short and not quite the usual book I read because I don't really read contemporary women's fiction, to be honest. But I think it was worth the read and well written. It was different than Remarkably Bright Creatures, obviously, or I wouldn't have read it. The protagonist in this book, Ro, is just entering her 30s, so quite a bit younger than the protagonist in the other book. And Well, the reason she has this personal relationship with Dolores, the giant Pacific octopus, is because it's her last connection to her father. Her father was a marine biologist, and he often went on, very long, extended expeditions, from which, on one of those, he brought back Dolores. And in her teen years, Ro experienced the trauma of her father not returning from one of these expeditions, and she's never really dealt with it. It also comes out in the book that her family life when she was young was not the best for a variety of reasons, and she's never really dealt with the trauma of that either. So here she is entering her 30s. She's never had a job other than working at the aquarium, which she sort of did on automatic pilot, and she doesn't have any strong relationships. And yeah, she realizes it's kind of now or never. She has to decide what she's going to do with her life. Her previous boyfriend who has dumped her, not really. They broke up because they had to, because he went off to Mars. He went off on an expedition to Mars, which that was mentioned in the back blurb of this book, and is one of the things that drew me to it. I thought it was going to be more a part of the book than it ended up being, and I do like a little bit of sci-fi, and it sounded really interesting. But yeah, I'm not even sure when this book is set. Somewhere in the not too distant future, but distant enough to allow for a long-term mission to Mars. Anyway, I did like this book, and I did find the relationship between Ro and Dolores to be touching, and I won't tell you more about it because it's part of the plot of the book, but yeah, that was a fun read. Lastly, for October, the second fiction book I read was Children of Ruin by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Now, I wasn't sure I was going to get to this book because I had never read book 1 in Tchaikovsky's Children of Time series, which is entitled Children of Time. So I had to read Children of Time first before reading Children of Ruin, and they're both over 500 pages long. But I did, and partially that's because Children of Time, book number 1, was, in my opinion, very, very good. And I think I gave it 5 stars. And if you're not familiar with this series, it's definitely hardcore sci-fi, and I found it challenging to read. I don't usually read such long hardcore sci-fi books, even though I do love sci-fi, but I loved Children of Time and the spider aliens. It was so good. I really did enjoy it, and I felt that the characters were developed enough. Some people think they aren't in this series, but I thought in Children of Time they definitely were. And I liked the ending a lot, which surprised me because the way it was going, I wasn't sure I would, but I did. Anyway, we're not talking about Children of Time. We're talking about the book number 2, Children of Ruin, where the aliens are not spiders, they are octopuses. So this book, okay, I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Children of Time. It was a little more hardcore sci-fi and abstract to me. Now, somebody who's used to reading books like this, like my son, probably it didn't affect them that way. But for me, it was just a little bit more confusing, a little bit harder to follow us in certain sections of the book, here and there in the middle. But overall, I did like this book. I did find it fascinating. I did enjoy seeing how these octopuses developed. Octopuses being so naturally and interestingly intelligent, and yet with the boost of the evolutionary process that one of the astronaut scientists embarks on over many, many, I don't know, decades. It's a long time because he keeps freezing himself. Anyway, those octopuses develop to be an insanely beyond imagination intelligent species, and we see them meet up in future years with the descendants of the humans from Children of Time, who have also evolved due to being gifted with the spiders' special abilities. So it is quite the journey, both literally and figuratively, reading this book. And overall, like I said, I did really enjoy it. Gave it, 4.25, 4.5. My star ratings, like I've said, are not necessarily set in stone. I often change them later. And I'm definitely going to be reading book 3 in the Children of Time series, Children of Memory. And I don't even know what the aliens are in that one, but I'm looking forward to it. Adrian Tchaikovsky is definitely one of the 2 authors that I was introduced to through Octotember that I will continue to read going forward. I really love his writing style, even if occasionally it feels a bit beyond me. The other writer that I have found I love so much is Dana Staff. So I didn't get to reading her Monarchs of the Sea book, which I intended to read. It was in my original POP. I don't think I said that, but it was. But I'm definitely going to read it now because she was the author of the biography of Jean Villepreux, the lady in the octopus that I love so much. So yeah, definitely going to read more of her books, and she has a lot of them that deal with cephalopods. So next year, I know one of the authors that I will definitely be featuring. So that concludes my joint wrap-up of Tudortember and OCTember, and I had a very good time in both of these reading events. Definitely will be taking part next year in both of them. And if you have never heard of them or heard of them but not participated yourself, either through creating videos if you're a content creator here on BookTube, or through reading and commenting on other people's videos if you're just a reader, we know that's the main thing we're all about here, right? I encourage you that next year you do take part in one or both of these great reading events. Until next time, I'm wishing you lots and lots of happy reading.